report from Family Life, bringing a Christian worldview to what's happening in New York, Pennsylvania, across the country, and around the world. Weather with Kevin Williams, plus special features and reports with the Family Life News team. Now, here's what's happening.
How was your Christmas? Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Webster. That question being asked a lot, of course, here on the day after, and we've got some answers from around the block and around the world. Some good, others not. We start with a place close to where it all began, in Bethlehem, war-torn Gaza. Amid the rubble of a more than year-long conflict, Christians still gathered in the Church of the Holy Family in Gaza City, still standing when many buildings near it are not. Some 45 miles or so east of there in Bethlehem itself, Christmas Eve services went on as scheduled in the Church of the Nativity on the West Bank, although the usual tourists were almost non-existent due to security concerns. At the Vatican,
Rivolgo un pensiero alle comunità cristiane in Palestina e in Israele.
Pope Francis delivering a traditional Christmas message, urging all people of all nations to, quote, silence the sounds of arms and overcome divisions. Christmas, of course, also had its lighter moments. Those are the sounds of some Germans in Berlin plunging into the icy waters of a local lake for a traditional Christmas Day plunge. And last-minute shoppers at a Wegmans in Gates, New York, treated to music sung by maintenance worker Jovan Howard, who told Spectrum News,
"It's a blessing. It really is. Knowing that every day I try to make a difference in people's lives."
No doubt he did that day. In Washington, a Hanukkah lighting ceremony outside the White House last night.
On behalf of the President, Dr. Biden, Vice President Harris, and the Second Gentleman, I wish you all a happy Hanukkah.
Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. The lighting of the 30-foot menorah is an annual tradition since 1979, just the fifth time in 14 years that the first night of Hanukkah coincided with Christmas. But as we know all too well, the troubles of this world never take a day off. It's looking more and more like the Christmas Day crash landing of an Azerbaijani plane in Kazakhstan was caused by Russian anti-aircraft fire. 38 people died, more than 24 injured in that incident, initially blamed on a bird strike, but video evidence appears to tell a different story.
In this remote Central Asian city off the Caspian Sea, the ground strewn with wreckage and the dead. Cell phone footage posted online shows passengers on board the plane before the crash. It appears there's damage to the wing and oxygen masks in use.
CBS's Chris Livesay, the Embraer 190 jet was flying from Azerbaijan to Russia. The crash came shortly after drone strikes hit southern Russia. This comes amid new security concerns about Ukraine targeting high-ranking Russian military officers.
Russia's top security agency says it's arrested several suspects involved in an alleged Ukrainian plot to assassinate senior military leaders. The head of Russia's chemical weapons was assassinated last week in an attack claimed by Ukraine. Now the Kremlin says there were several Russian military leaders to be targeted.
Cammie McCormick. Those Russian officers, though, ordered massive Christmas Day strikes on Ukraine's infrastructure.
Moscow launching more than 170 missiles and drones on Ukraine on Wednesday, targeting that country's infrastructure. The president saying the U.S. will continue to strengthen Ukraine's defense, promising a, quote, surge of weapons deliveries, unquote, to the country.
Fox's Paul Stevens. Also on Christmas Day, a scary mishap in Midtown Manhattan involving an SUV taxi that plowed into pedestrians, trapping an Australian woman and her young son underneath. People rushed to help before police could even get to the scene, including this man, whose wife was also among several people injured.
My wife got hit kind of up on her back shoulder, sent her spinning. She didn't knock her to the ground, made sure she was okay, and then noticed that the car had come up, hit, I think, the building.
It's believed the driver of the cab suffered a medical emergency. All who were injured are expected to recover. A somber anniversary this day. A memorial service marking 20 years ago today that a major undersea earthquake in Indonesia caused a massive tsunami that claimed nearly 230,000 lives along the Pacific Rim. Australia's Prime Minister led a memorial there.
It was a natural disaster on a catastrophic scale, with a force that still has the power to shock 2 decades later.
That tsunami wave was up to 100 feet high in some places, wiping out everything in its path. It's the deadliest natural disaster of the 21st century, one of the worst in all recorded history. Back in this country, a bird flu outbreak has prompted a nationwide pet food recall.
Northwest Natural says it's voluntarily recalling a batch of 2-pound bags of its feline turkey recipe raw frozen pet food after it tested positive for the bird flu virus. Health officials say a fatal case in a domestic cat was reported.
Correspondent Courtney Keeley. There's also an eye drop recall. The FDA says Alcon Labs is calling a single lot of Systane lubricant eye drops Ultra SPF single vials on the go. They might be contaminated with a fungus. The affected eye drops come in 25-count packages with an expiration date of September 2025. Now, finally, now that the big cooking holidays are over, maybe it's time for a little kitchen cleanup. Bree Tennis has some thoughts on what you might want to toss.
The Environmental Protection Agency says growing research shows some black plastic kitchen tools are made from recycled electronic waste. When heated, those can leach toxic chemicals into your food. They say toss that drawer full of black plastic spoons, spatulas, ladles, tongs, and containers and start off 2025 toxic-free in the kitchen. As for replacements, they say look for tools made from wood, stainless steel, or silicone. I'm Bree Tennis.
All right, thank you much. Still to come on the Noon Report, 2 Western New York communities consider teaming up. New year brings new laws to the Empire State and picking up the pieces in Luzerne County.
Good afternoon. I'm Kevin Williams, calling for gradually rising temperatures from day to day into the weekend. I'll have the numbers and the complete forecast in 10.
Sounds good to me, Kevin. Thank you. Now checking the stories making news where you live in New York and Pennsylvania. The Chautauqua County communities of Dunkirk and Fredonia are often mentioned in the same breath, and that association may soon become more formal. Facing strained budgets, the city of Dunkirk and village of Fredonia are exploring merging their fire and police departments. Dunkirk Mayor Kate Govias tells WKBW.
I really do think there's a cost savings to this. We really are one community as the Dunkirk-Fredonia area.
Fredonia Mayor Michael Ferguson.
It makes sense. We have equipment that they don't have. I think that both communities are saying enough with the taxes for a while.
Dunkirk's police chief says he thinks the merger makes sense, and so does his Fredonia counterpart, David Price.
Two like populations that are only separated by a paper border or side by side.
The communities plan to seek state grant money that could help pay for the merger. New York Governor Kathy Hochul, gearing up to push her agenda through in Albany, plans to tackle affordability, public safety, and mental health. Hochul set to take the wraps off of her plans in her State of the State address on January 14th. That'll test her ability to navigate the legislature. Anthony Piscatelli is with CMW Strategies.
New York State is a very strong executive state, executive powers, and nothing illustrates that more than the power of the governor through the state budget. That's her maximum leverage to deal with the legislature.
She's already previewed a $3 billion proposal to distribute checks to New Yorkers, and a tax relief package may also be on the table. Despite a Democratic majority in the legislature, Hochul's faced resistance from lawmakers on several issues. The legislative session begins January 8th. And there are some new laws on the books in New York effective New Year's Day. Our Sarah Harnish with a preview.
Minimum wage workers will see a bump in their pay of 50 cents per hour. It'll be easier for new moms to take time off to care for their health before their babies are born. The update to the paid leave program will give workers an additional 20 hours of paid sick leave for prenatal care, and doulas will be covered under Medicaid. And contractors and subcontractors will now have to register with the Department of Labor before submitting any new bids or beginning work on a covered project. Sarah Harnish, Family Life News.
Thank you, Sarah. Fire crews in the Buffalo suburb of Lackawanna responded to a burning home around 7 a.m. Christmas morning. Officials say one person was rescued and had to be pulled through a front window to safety. That person is last reported in critical condition at ECMC. Other people in the home were evacuated safely. And northeast Pennsylvania's string of fires continued yesterday with a house fire in Natticoke. That one broke out around 7 p.m. last night in a storage room of a home in Plymouth Township. Firefighters say everyone who was there made it out okay. No word on what might have started that blaze. Natticoke's fire chief says last night's fire was the third straight night his crews had to respond to flames at someone's home. December is the biggest month of the year for house fires. The lovely lattes and costly cappuccinos should be flowing at Starbucks again today. A 5-day nationwide strike at more than 300 Starbucks locations apparently over, at least for the time being.
2, 4, 6, 8, we deserve a living wage! We deserve a living wage!
Over 5,000 Starbucks employees walked off the job last week, including some at a Starbucks in Buffalo, where this veteran barista tells WGRZ that a previous company offer that had no immediate wage increase and just a 1.5% hike in future years left union members colder than an iced coffee.
They can do better. We know they can do better. You would be shocked what just a couple of dollars more an hour could do for the life of your average food service worker.
Starbucks management has accused the union of walking away from the bargaining table. Months ago, the company promised workers there would be a new agreement by the end of the year. Rochester, New York police continuing their investigation into multiple vehicle break-ins in the city. They say around 1 a.m. yesterday, vehicle break-ins were reported in the parking lot of a Roman Catholic church after a midnight mass. A few hours later, 11 more cars found with broken windows on Park Avenue. More details being revealed about the deadly assault of an inmate at Marcy Correctional Facility in upstate New York. A document filed with the Oneida County clerk says Robert Brooks was beaten by multiple corrections officers inside the infirmary building earlier this month. He was rushed to a nearby hospital but died there. The incident also was caught on body-worn cameras. Governor Hochul has already called for staff members involved in that assault to be fired. And to Pennsylvania again, cleanup continues at the site of a historic Luzerne County, PA building ravaged by a Christmas week fire. The Monday afternoon blaze on South Main Street in Pittston gutted much of the historic former dress factory there. Joe Scarantino tells WNEP the city lost an important piece of its historic garment industry.
It was always a dress factory from when I was a little kid. After I grew up, I ended up renting the top floor. I had a dress factory there. We employed maybe 80 people. Every place you looked, there was a dress factory. It's sad. It's all gone.
Rachel Harrison lived in the building the past couple of years and also lost her small embroidery business there.
You're trying to make it bigger and bigger. You get this job, you get that job, and it's also just your passion.
She says she'll try to patch her small business back together.
We'll do what we can. That's the great thing about making art, is that you're creating things out of nothing a lot of times.
Firefighters say that blaze was tough to contain, fueled in part by oil from sewing machines, which permeated the interior over the years. Investigators think the fire started in a second-floor kitchen. Families were evacuated from a next-door apartment building for now, but fire officials say that structure does appear to be intact. And some first responders from Butler, Pennsylvania, are being invited to walk in next month's inauguration parade in Washington, D.C. Organizers have extended that invitation to those who responded to the July 13th assassination attempt on former President and now President-elect Donald Trump. Well, maybe you spent part of your Christmas day watching an NFL doubleheader. Randy's got that and more as he checks sports.
Good afternoon, I'm Randy Snavely. Mark, the AFC playoffs will once again head through Kansas City. The Chiefs clinched the top seed in the conference after their 29-10 win over the Pittsburgh Steelers. Patrick Mahomes threw for 320 yards and 3 touchdowns. Travis Kelce caught one of those TD passes, and he became the team's all-time leader in receiving touchdowns with 77. The Steelers have now lost 3 straight and dropped into second place in the AFC North at 10-6. They have already qualified for a playoff spot. The other game yesterday saw the Ravens just demolish the Texans in Houston 31-2. On to the NBA. Mikal Bridges gave the Madison Square Garden crowd a nice Christmas present. The forward knocked down 41 points to lead the Knicks to their 5th straight victory, a 117-114 thriller over the San Antonio Spurs. Karl Anthony Towns added 21 points and 9 rebounds. Jalen Brunson scored 20 and dished out 10 helpers. Young phenom for the Spurs, Victor Wembanyama, he went off for 42 points and had 18 rebounds in their defeat. In Boston, Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid combined for 60 points, and Philadelphia surprised the Celtics 118-114. Maxey finished with 33 points. Embiid had 27. Caleb Martin chipped in with 23. Jason Tatum racked up 32 points and 15 boards for the C's, who have lost back-to-back games for the first time this season. Elsewhere on the hardwood, the T-Wolves won by 6 over the Mavericks 105-99. The Lakers got past the Warriors 115-113, and the Suns came out on top of Denver 110-100. That is a look at sports.
All right, thank you, Randy. Still to come on the Noon Report, Faith Under Fire, a look back at the year gone by on the front lines of faith versus culture.
Welcome to Breakpoint, a daily look at an ever-changing culture through the lens of unchanging truth. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet. As we head into the end of this year, we'll be looking at some of the most important issues that Christians faced in 2024. Every generation, of course, faces different challenges. We may have hoped for different challenges than the ones we got, but God chose to put us in this time and in this place. These are the "you are here" issues for the church, the ones that help us better understand the moment that we're in. One of the "you are here" stories from 2024 is, of course, the rise of artificial intelligence. But this is not just a story about new and more powerful technology. It's a story about how we think about ourselves, how we understand what it means to be human. The mad scientist rarely begins as a villain. From Dr. Frankenstein to Spider-Man's Doc Ock, villains are far more often the victims of a combination of good intentions, unstoppable curiosity, and way too much arrogance. Their plights on screen mirror real life, as evidenced by, of course, artificial intelligence. In his book, 2084, Artificial Intelligence and the Future of Humanity, Oxford professor and Christian apologist Dr. John Lennox argued that the promise of AI outpaces the reality. Though AI might be great at specific, mostly repetitive tasks like playing chess, constructing sentences, or identifying precancerous tissues on a CAT scan, AI is not as capable as human beings at many other things, like navigating an unfamiliar room or detecting human sarcasm. That's because, at least so far, AI lacks the kind of generalized intelligence that allows humans to move from task to task, to think in the abstract, to apply background knowledge, to use common sense, to understand cause and effect. The human mind, in other words, is still exceptional. It's unlike anything the world of computing has yet produced, although AI technologies are becoming more powerful and more capable day by day. How Christians should view and use artificial intelligence was the topic of a Breakpoint forum that was held back in February. During that forum, Abdu Murray, a seasoned cultural and religious commentator, offered a very helpful theological framing of artificial intelligence. Here's Abdu.
This is spoken of in the Bible essentially as that sort of, for lack of a better application to it, but that original sin where we take our God-given purpose and we try to one-up God. Adam and Eve's sin was that they didn't want to be with God. They wanted to be God. And in our current digital garden, what we're finding is that in creating and then bragging about a computer system that outdoes us and then renders us, for lack of a better word, obsolete, we brag about it because we are one-upping God. We are becoming almost super transcendent over the transcendent one. And why I say this is not to scare us, but it is actually to give us comfort, because there's ancient wisdom in a book for our modern issues. And if we see that, then maybe we can see a way forward. If we see a book that explains the human condition as it actually is, maybe there's a way out of this digital garden without imbibing too much of the fruit.
We are so close to reaching our year-end goal, and the challenge grant that was provided by generous donors has not only been met, it's been extended by another $100,000 by more generous donors. Praise God. Please help us today by giving at colsoncenter.org/December. That's colsoncenter.org/December. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet with Breakpoint.
All right, now let's check in with meteorologist Kevin Williams.
Good afternoon. Here is your Family Life regional weather forecast. As we head through the afternoon, decent amount of sunshine emerging across central and eastern Pennsylvania. Elsewhere, clouds will be rather stubborn with some limited breaks developing. High temperatures in the 30s. Now, for tonight, quiet. Clouds will continue to break. Low temps, mostly 20s, teens in some rural valleys. And then tomorrow, fair amount of sunshine. High temps approaching 40. Saturday, cloudy, a bit of rain, and a high temperature in the 40s and lower 50s.
Thank you very much, Kevin. This is the Noon Report on Family Life. I'm Mark Webster. Thanks again for joining us. Up next, 2024's greatest hits from Faith Under Fire, a sampling of interviews from the variety of religious battlefields in our culture during the past year. Brought to you by Family Life's Greg Gillespie.
This is Faith Under Fire from Family Life News. We rewind and bring you not so much the greatest hits of the year, but a sampling of the kinds of issues that we've covered each Thursday on Family Life News. We have had several topics that have come up again and again. We'll sample those here in this special feature, but also look at some of the unique angles that we've covered on Faith Under Fire. One issue that we've come to again and again throughout the year is the question of gender identity and gender transitions and how that affects women's sports and girls' locker rooms and restrooms. We were grateful to talk with Riley Gaines, who is one of the most prominent national spokespeople on the issue, but we also got a local angle from the president of Houghton University, an NCAA sports school that's dealing with regulations brought about by their athletic competitions while also holding to traditional conservative Christian values.
Houghton University is an institution. We're a Christ-centered institution. We assign students to residence halls and participation in any sex-segregated activities based on their biological sex. Students at Houghton University compete on athletics teams based on their biological sex. That is not changing. That, however, does not cover what it looks like in collegiate competition. We have had young women who compete against biological males. We have decided we're going to advocate for change in NCAA policy. As far as young women on our campus, they do have the ability to opt out of competition, competing against biological males.
One of the privileges we have with Family Life News is to talk with experts who give some perspectives on how to enhance your life individually and as a household. Jared Lopes is the organizer of a group called Dad Tired.
That sure sounds like it's a play on word of the phrase dead tired.
That's one of the most good unintentional things that I've probably ever done is titling it Dad Tired. That was a total accident. I actually was going through a really rough season in my own life and marriage. My wife and I were on the brink of divorce. There was this season where I was really detached as a husband and a dad. And my wife, I didn't know this, but we were in the middle of a fight and she paused and she had tears in her eyes and she said, Jared, I just want you to know that I've been waking up at 2 a.m. every morning and I've been going into the living room and I've been getting on my face and I've been begging God to capture your heart again. It reminded me of the verse in Romans that says it's his kindness that leads us to repentance. And it was the kindness of my wife. It was the kindness of God through my wife that really, for the first time in a long time, led me to repentance, to soften my heart and to come back to him. Guys who have healed souls. And those guys are the ones who have a group of brothers around them who they're confessing sin often to. They're praying with each other. They're being the kind of brothers that know everything about them and love them fully.
Is that camaraderie something that seems to be missing more often than not?
Most men would not say that they are lonely. And yet in my conversations with men, even if they're not using the words, what they're actually describing is loneliness. I think that we need to have this call again to say, brother, you cannot do this alone. And that does not mean you're weak. You are weak either way, whether you try to do it alone or not. What you need is to admit your brokenness, come find other brothers, and do this thing together.
We talked with a campus pastor at Altoona, Pennsylvania, who gave us some perspectives on the spiritual challenges and the spiritual openness for the younger generation.
Specifically on the campus, all students really get a bad rap. I talk with numerous people from churches and even administrators, and they all just make the assumption that students do not have any spiritual life. But what I think they're missing is I'm seeing a lot of students who are willing to give faith a chance. Maybe not completely dive into it, but they're willing to give it a chance and see, maybe we can actually have a conversation about it and see what this is about and see what you guys are about.
On this special edition of Faith Under Fire, we're recalling some of the interviews that we've had throughout the past year. One of the issues we covered was a local Christian university that closed its doors. Clark Summit University. We talked with people there. The issue of campuses closing is not unique to that one place, but is a part of what's happening in Christian and secular schools. Christian journalist Warren Smith at Ministry Watch.
Well, what happened in your neck of the woods, Greg, with Clark Summit is unfortunately kind of the trend. In general, there are kind of a triple whammy, a perfect storm of issues that are facing Christian colleges right now. Number one is that there are simply fewer college-aged students now than there have been in generations past. We're having fewer babies as a culture. That's having a significant impact on colleges and universities. A lot of folks are moving to online. There's been some question about the value of a college education, especially when you consider the spiraling costs. And a lot of families and individuals are just deciding that it's not worth it anymore. They're looking for other alternatives, trade schools and whatnot. So the bottom line is a lot of colleges are shutting down or in financial trouble. We looked in our research, looked to an organization called Higher Ed Dive. That's an organization that does deep dives into the higher education market. And they say that at least 116 colleges have shut down since 2016. That's a lot of schools, and it's probably just the tip of the iceberg.
What is the prescription for Christian schools these days to maybe learn from some of those places that are succeeding by finding a niche and really doing a great job of promoting and recruiting?
The ones that are succeeding seem to be really focusing their programs, and they're also focusing in areas that might be considered non-traditional for Christian schools. A lot of creativity, I think, is going to be necessary. I think one of the things that I think the Christian community at large is going to have to face is they're going to have to ask the question, do we really want Christian higher education? Is it important to the church? My answer to that question is yes, and that's why we've been covering this. But I think the evangelical church has to answer that question in a broader way. We're going to have to support Bible-believing evangelical colleges so that we can get the tuition costs down to a level that makes sense for middle-class families. Otherwise, we're just going to see this trend continue.
And one last stop on our tour of 2024 interviews, some encouraging news for Christian churches. I interviewed Allison Norton of the Hartford Institute, who started a 5-year study of congregational health and vitality just as the COVID era began. Partway through that 5-year study, we're finding that a lot of congregations are recuperating and starting fresh, finding some bounce back in worship attendance, volunteer participation, and finances. One of the big differences on whether congregations are doing better or not, whether they're really relying on people who never write checks for anything else to write a check to support their congregation.
As we've seen churches shift to online giving, we've seen their giving go up. This is a trend we've seen in our research for more than 20 years. When congregations emphasize or include online giving, their per capita giving goes up. So many churches have benefited from shifting to online forms of giving.
Is there a one-size-fits-all answer to, are we fully recovered? Are we mostly recovered? Are we partly recovered? What is your research telling us?
What we see is really a mixed message. And I think the largest takeaway from our study is that the landscape is unsettled and churches continue to respond to new questions that emerge about, for example, how to do virtual worship, how to create a sense of commitment and community among virtual only attenders who may feel more like spectators than committed, involved participants. Some churches doing well, responding creatively and innovatively, being experimental, and other churches that people are tired of this process of change and innovation and just want to go back to the way that things were.
Faith Under Fire is a part of our Family Life Noon Report each Thursday. You'll also hear highlights at our 5 o'clock report and other newscasts in the morning and afternoon. We also offer a podcast version at familylife.org and the Family Life Now mobile app. If you were intrigued by any of these samples we gave you on this edition, you can find all of our Faith Under Fire archives on our webpage. I'm Greg Gillespie, Family Life News.
Thank you very much, Greg. Just ahead now, a young boy teaches some bullies a lesson in self-sacrifice.
Good afternoon. Here is your Family Life regional weather forecast. An area of high pressure is keeping our weather quiet today, but the cloud cover has been stubborn owing to some low-level moisture. But that moisture will gradually be eroded, and our skies will be gradually clearing as we head through the next 36 hours. Our next weather maker is in the heartland. It arrives with milder air, but some rain this weekend. So the call as we head through the afternoon, decent amount of sunshine emerging across central and eastern Pennsylvania. Elsewhere, clouds will be rather stubborn with some limited breaks developing. High temperatures in the 30s. Now, for tonight, quiet. Clouds will continue to break. Low temps, mostly 20s, teens in some rural valleys. And then tomorrow, fair amount of sunshine. High temps approaching 40. Saturday, cloudy, a bit of rain, and a high temperature in the 40s and lower 50s.
Well, let's hear it for that early January thaw, Kevin. Thank you very much. Finally at noon, 8-year-old Zayn Barry of Yuma, Arizona, and his mom were just minding their own business at a local park when they witnessed a very disturbing scene. A group of kids tossing around a kitten like it was a football. Well, that's when Zayn stepped up and offered to trade his skateboard for the kitten. The bullies took him up on the offer, and Zayn took home Peaches, his new best friend.
We go on the bed and play.
That selfless act left both his mom and a Humane Society official impressed.
He just fell in love with it, and you could see it, and then you could see the cat just loved him.
For Zayn to have that care and that drive at such a young age is honestly outstanding.
The community took note of Zayn's courageous act, too, pitching in for a gift card to allow him to buy a new skateboard to go along with his newfound friend. And that's the world we live in for this Thursday, December 26th, 2024. As always, we thank you for listening. I'm Mark Webster, Family Life News.
You've been listening to the Noon Report, heard weekdays on Family Life. Thank you for listening.